I'm rolling. Go ahead.
States and schools begin to ban social media and smartphones in schools following comments from the Surgeon General that equated social media use is as bad as cigarettes and alcohol. Also, AI gets dumped at the drive-thru and companies start to go after employees that are using mouse jigglers. We'll talk about these stories and more on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. The guy behind the monitors is Chris. Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Going well. And once again, zooming in from a remote location somewhere in Europe is Mike Elgan. He is a contributing columnist for Computer World and a legendary journalist and author. Welcome back, Mike.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
All right. Before we jump into the show, I wanted to ask you about this digital nomad lifestyle that you have got going on. When did this start? And explain what it means when you call yourself a digital nomad.
Started in 2006, and in fact, I was even writing for Computer World all the way back then. And I started to be sort of captivated by the idea that was expressed by a number of people who were talking about living and working while they travel. One of the first people I knew personally was an editor I worked with when I was editing a magazine, and this person sort of drove around the country. He was a hang glider enthusiast, and he drove around the country in his Winnebago with his wife and connected wherever he could. This is in the early 2000s, so it was a pretty adventurous thing to do. But in 2006, my wife had some time off, and I really didn't have the leisure to take time off, and we wanted to go to Central America for 6 weeks. And so we did it, and as an experiment, I thought, I'm not going to tell my editors, I'm not going to say a word and see if they notice. And in fact, they didn't. And I was taking meetings. Basically, we were finding Wi-Fi by just finding a little table next to a hotel in the jungle somewhere in Guatemala or whatever. And I managed to do it. And at the end of it, I wrote about it. And in fact, for a while on the Computer World site, I had a sort of blog, kind of a blog thing called The World of My Office. And I wrote about the digital nomad lifestyle for a long time. But basically, the concept is very simple. The idea is that you travel, and while you're traveling, you work, which enables you to travel a lot more. Now, over the years, since 2006, my wife and I have done a number of things where we've had a house, then we said, well, we don't need such a big house, let's have a smaller house. And we had a smaller house, and then finally we're like, what do you need a house for? So we don't have a house at all. We just travel full-time. When we're in the United States, we stay with our adult children, and when most of the time we're abroad, we stay in Airbnbs or friends' homes, or mostly Airbnbs, actually. And we've been doing this for many, many years, and it's just a fantastic lifestyle that we love doing.
Have you found Mike, have you found that the technology is getting better than when you started this in 2006? Although with the caveat that we've been having a little bit of difficulty connecting with you while you're in Europe.
Yes, it has gotten a lot better. And of course, 10 years ago, we wouldn't dream of doing something like a video conference abroad, right? I mean, you could do it. And in fact, we did it, and it's gotten a lot better. Zoom is actually fantastic, even if you have a limited connection. The problem that we had with the problems we've had before is that sometimes the connection just stops. The connection's fast enough, it's good enough for Zoom, not good enough for Apple FaceTime, for example. But then it just quits, and there's literally no IP going in either direction for a minute or two, and that's just unacceptable. So I'm in a makerspace in Provence right now, and they've got a nice fast connection, so it works. But so if you think about it, when we started, there was no Uber, there was no Airbnb.
Yeah.
So to find sort of housing, we would actually book a hotel remotely. We'd go check into the hotel, for 3 or 4 days, and then we'd literally walk around and look for signs that said, apartment to rent or room to rent or something like that. And it always worked, perfectly fine. Now with Airbnb, forget it. It's so much easier.
Right. All right. Let's jump into some of the news of the week. Thanks again for telling us about that. And the big news, I think, there were about 3 different stories around the idea of social media bans and smartphone bans. This all kind of was spurred from the Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He basically said the threat that social media poses to children requires urgent action, and he demanded Congress to put labels on the apps as it does with cigarettes and alcohol. The quote here: "The mental health crisis among young people is an emergency, and social media has emerged as an important contributor." Murthy said this in an op-ed in the New York Times last week. He cited several studies, including a 2019 American Medical Association study published that showed that teens who spend 3 hours a day on social media double their risk of depression. Teens spend nearly 5 hours a day on social media apps, according to a Gallup poll. But he could not act unilaterally to put a warning label on apps. That requirement would have to come from Congress, with whom Murthy pleaded to pass a bill. So, he said this, and then within like days of this, the Los Angeles school systems banned the use of cell phones and social media by students. So over 429,000 students in the nation's second largest school district will be prohibited from using cell phones and social media platforms during the school day after the LA Unified School District Board passed the ban Tuesday, which was a day after the comments from Murthy. And then New York also last week passed legislation, or a couple weeks ago, passed legislations to ban addictive social media algorithms for kids. So now you've got one of the largest states in the U.S. You've got the largest school district in the U.S. It feels like the ball is rolling towards this. As we were discussing this, I went onto the Wall Street Journal today, and they actually have another story about how Instagram's algorithms are basically allowing teenagers under the age of 13 to basically view sexual content like really quickly. So I think this is steamrolling, and we've talked about this on our shows before with other guests. Is this something that the tech industry needs to get behind, because it is a bad look for Instagram and Meta and a lot of these other social media companies?
Yeah, and I think most social media companies tend to have an age limit of 13, which is basically impossible to
verify,
enforce.
Yeah, enforce too.
I posted a snarky tweet like a couple months ago when I found out that Lego has a site where you can build, you can submit your Lego kits and maybe they'll pick it up and make it. And they raised the age limit to 16. And this is Lego. There's nothing addictive about it or whatever. I think that the general consensus from the research that I've read is that 16 years old is a good age for kids to start using social media. I think personally the key would be to ban kids under 16 from using social media. But labels, I don't think labels are going to do anything at all. I don't think they do anything for cigarettes and alcohol either.
Well, I think a lot of the people have said that the once they started putting those labels on cigarettes and alcohol, it did start the movement. It did start realizing that how unhealthy that was. I think it's amazing that they equated it to that level of addiction.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think that there was a movement and the labels were part of the movement, but really it was the public awareness, people reading stories about the deleterious effects of cigarettes and to a lesser extent alcohol. I know that in other countries, there are countries that have not just warning labels, but the entire pack of cigarettes is just a gruesome picture showing the effects of cigarettes on health.
Right.
But I'm not sure that I think, maybe they help, maybe they don't. I tend to think that anything that's always there, like a label, your eyes glaze over and you don't even see it anymore after a while, after repeated exposure. And so I think we do need a public awareness campaign. I think we do need to do the same things we've done with cigarettes, for example, where, back, 80 years ago or whatever, everybody smoked all the time, and now it's relatively rare. And we do need something like that, but we have to agree on what the risk is, what the harms are. I think Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, which is How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness, he made a very, very strong case, and it's research based. So I think that the idea should be that, okay, look, social media is for kids 16 and older and not before. And so we need to get parents on board. We need to get schools on board. We need public awareness campaigns. And we've done this with many things. We did it with littering in the 70s. We did it with. There's so many ways that this is actually something the United States is really good at. Think of people picking up after their dog with a little plastic bag, right? That never happened until a certain period of time where it became socially unacceptable to not do that. And so I think we need a big push, a big public awareness campaign. Everybody needs to get behind it.
Yeah.
Politicians need to get behind it. The churches, schools, everybody who's talking to parents and kids needs to get behind this idea that social media is not particularly healthy for kids.
Right. What bothers me in a lot of these stories is the fakeness of the Instagram and the Meta spokespeople that go, oh well, we're doing our best and we've got all of these, these rules in place, and so that's what bothered me about this Wall Street Journal story, which basically said, again, they were just saying the same thing, like we've got all these things in place, and the Journal goes out and says we did this in about 5 minutes. We started getting racy content because of this algorithm that says if you watch something, it says, well, you must like this, so then it just gives you more and more of that content. And I didn't want to post this story on the show because the article does include several some not really racy things, but just ideas of some of the Instagram photos and reels that people were getting after this. Again, after like 5 minutes of setting up this account and liking some videos and then getting more. So.
Sure.
I wish the companies would take this a little bit more seriously, but I think they're going to take it seriously when the lawsuits, and there are some lawsuits out there. We've talked to a lot of the lawyers that are involved in those. I think that's going to kind of put the screws to a lot of these companies.
Absolutely.
In addition to all of these awareness programs. So, Chris,
and there's unacceptable content, right? There's the kind you're talking about. There's also just addiction generally. But to me, the biggest issue is the fact that if you're addicted to social media, and a lot of people are, a lot of adults are, we want parents to get their kids off, but how do you get the parents off?
Right.
The problem is you're not there. You're not in the room. If you're like an influencer, an online influencer, I see it all over the world. The people around who are physically near you don't matter at all. What matters is the algorithm, satisfying the algorithm, satisfying the people on social media. And it's the same thing if you're consuming this content. You're not there. You're somewhere else, and you're just flipping through. And you're also seeing all this. It's not there's pornographic content, drug related stuff, all that. That stuff is bad for sure. But like also just the idea that like you think your life should be all like being on a speedboat in Ibiza, and then you should be like. And if you're not that, then you're nothing. If you're not beautiful and like glamorous and all these things. And believe me, most of the people who portray themselves that way on social media, that's all a phony baloney thing. Because I see them on the other side of the camera. They're stressed out, they're miserable, and they only appear to be enjoying themselves for the camera as a performance.
Yeah.
And so this is not a healthy world for children. And I think that the first thing we need to teach kids in schools is learn to be with other people, learn to interact with other people who are right in front of you. Instead of like giving them this pipeline to another universe.
There's an example of this. I was with my kids. They're all teenagers, and they're on their phones all the time. I try to tell them about all the dangers of all this, and they're like, and they go, yeah, Dad, okay, great. Yeah. But we were at a McDonald's, and we had ordered food through the kiosk because they've all got kiosks now, so you don't have to talk to someone. So then at some point, they wanted some dessert or they wanted another extra thing. I said, well, and I went to my oldest daughter. I said, here's $10. Go up and order it. And like, she gave me this look of like, I don't want to talk to that person. I don't want to do this. Why can't we just order it through the app or go back to the kiosk? I'm like, just go up and order. Like, you have to have these interactions with people or it's just going to go down this bad hole.
It's uncomfortable. It's a little bit unnerving for a young person to go talk to a stranger adult to like order something at McDonald's or something like that. That's why it's good for them to do it.
Yeah.
Because like then you do it and you're like, oh, okay, that was fine. And you're somebody who can interact with others. That's the whole point. The discomfort is the whole point.
When you're in this doing this digital and nomad thing and you're visiting all of these really cool locations, do you participate as I don't want to call you an influencer. I mean, you're a different kind of influencer, Mike, but Do you go and do those types of things to tell everybody else, that you're out there doing this, or like how do you balance that so you don't become one of those fake people?
I do a version of that. So my wife has a business where we actually have food and wine related experiences. We're having one next week here in Provence. That's why we're in France right now. Mm-hmm. And we come and everybody stays in an old farmhouse, and we have like chefs come and cook for it. We go to amazing restaurants. We do a bunch of secret things, and so to a certain extent, we do a kind of a marketing thing. But what's weird about it is that most sort of lifestyle social media influencers portray their lives as being much, much better than it really is. And what we do is we portray our life as being much worse than it really is, even though it looks great, because it's really great. But part of my wife's sort of thing is that everything's a secret. So the coolest things we do, we never show that on social media.
Okay.
And so anyway, but I am kind of one of those people, and it bothers me a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't do anything phony.
Okay.
I'm like, I show people the real thing.
All right, cool. Because, I don't want you to turn into one of those people that blocks the line at the museum while you're getting a selfie.
No. I would never do that.
All right, so I want to switch gears and talk about AI. There was an article this week that suggested that ChatGPT 4 has passed the Turing test, according to researchers. The Turing test was first proposed as the imitation game by computer scientist Alan Turing in 1950, judges whether a machine's ability to show intelligence is indistinguishable from a human. For a machine to pass the Turing test, it must be able to talk to somebody and fool them into thinking it is a human. So scientists decided to replicate this test by asking 500 people to speak with 4 different respondents, including a human, the 1960s era AI program ELIZA, as well as both GPT 3.5 and GPT 4, which is the AI that powers ChatGPT. The conversations would last 5 minutes, after which participants had to say whether they believed they were talking to a human or an AI. In the study, which was published May 9th, the scientists found that participants judged GPT-4 to be human 54% of the time. And ELIZA got 22% of the time. GPT-3.5 got 50%, and humans scored 67%, which concerns me a little bit, which means that you were having a conversation with a human, and 1 in 3 still thought you were having a conversation with a computer. Yeah, I would feel bad for the human that had to sit there and then basically, 1 in 3 people thought that they were not real. So
along those lines, CAPTCHAs now, AI can do CAPTCHAs now. So to find a motorcycle
really?
And all that stuff, better than people. And so machines are better at proving they're human than humans are, which is that's where we are with AI right now. I think the thing with the Turing test, I'm sure it's whether GPT 4.0 is passing the Turing test. It sounds like it is. Doesn't matter. Within a year or two, all of the AIs will easily pass the Turing test. I think the bigger point is that the Turing test, although it's been famous in science fiction, it's been famous in computer science circles for a long time, and I'm sure it seemed like a really great test, is really not. It's really somewhat pointless. Tricking people. I mean, basically, the AI is trained on what people say. When people say this, people tend to say that.
Right.
And so it's really, I really don't think it's that big of a deal to pass a Turing test. It absolutely does not indicate intelligence at all. So I think that was the original intent. If a machine can do this, and it's really thinking, and so on, because they couldn't imagine generative AI back then, right? They couldn't imagine these massive data sets training this type of AI.
Right.
So I really don't think the Turing test is important. I think the other point is that something that concerns me is, will people care if who they're talking to is human or not? You call the bank, and if it's AI and it's convincing AI, it seems like a person. Will people? And you tell people, that's AI. I think people will generally say, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to get my checking account.
Yeah, the big deal would be whether or not the accuracy of the answer is correct or not. I think that's what bugged people a lot about those early chatbot systems that were based on that call and response algorithm. That you would sit there and chat, and you'd be like, I want to get a refund, and they're like, well, here's a recipe for donuts. I'm like, no, that's not what I want. I want I want to get my refund. And you get frustrated by that, especially with those voice automated ones. Not even talking about the text chatbots, but you'd be like, press 3 for this, and you would be, I just want to talk to a human, because I could get my point across to a human a lot faster than I could with a lot of these systems.
Right, and I also the original Turing test was about typing, right? But now AIs have voices, and the voices are amazing. And if anybody listening or watching this wants to really engage with a very human-like AI, I think the best one right now is until GPT-4o comes out with its not Scarlett Johansson voice. Is probably Pi.ai.
Okay.
So Pi.ai has a number of voices. Some are better than others, but they go really far in adding very human-like elements to it. There's a lot of uhs and ahs, and sort of like, they do the kind of thing. To my mind, they overdo it a little bit, but it's really, really human-like, and you can turn up the speed and so on. If you make it a little faster, it sounds a little smarter, that sort of thing. So it's Pi.ai is something everybody should try. You can get the app on your phone and you can just leave it running and sit there and just have conversations with it. And it also does something, which is it has a kind of agency. It'll bring up topics, or it'll change the subject, or things like that. So it's actually really a lot more like talking to a human than ChatGPT is.
Do computer scientists and others in that philosophical space, do we need to come up with a new Turing test or an updated one? Or, like you said, does it really matter at this point, and whether we know whether something is like, how do we judge whether we've gotten to artificial general intelligence, for example? Is it because they can do 3 separate tasks, or like what? I think we almost need a new one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can discard the Turing test, and we probably do need increasingly sophisticated tests. General AI, I mean, it's, people are going to define it differently. People define AI differently, right? So it's going to be a point of contention, I think, until the end of time. But
does this mean so you also said that the CAPTCHA, AI is getting better at CAPTCHA, better than humans.
Yes.
Does this mean that CAPTCHA now has to be redesigned? So if you pick the answers too good, that they're like, well, maybe you're a robot, so now you have to fail. I fail a lot on those picture ones.
One element of CAPTCHA is actually like that. So the kind where you have to just click the box. Well, what it's doing is it's looking at your mouse movements, and if you have an imperfectly moving pointer, then okay, that's a person. But if it just zips right to it and puts it right in the middle, it's like, well, that's not a person. It's too perfect. It's too well done. And so, I think that is actually going to be a red flag if something's really good at proving it's human.
Yeah. More tests to prove that I'm a human. Great. All right, I want to go to another AI related story, and this was that Microsoft announced it will no longer ship Recall, which is that AI tool that tracks user activity when the company releases its Copilot Plus PCs. It announced this on a blog post, and basically it will shift from being a broadly available tool to a preview feature available only through the Windows Insiders program. And Microsoft plans to make the AI feature available on all Copilot PCs soon after they receive feedback through this Windows program. I guess score one for the good guys out there in the computer security space that saw this and went, whoa, this is not a cool thing. So, and good on Microsoft for at least recognizing that, because I think that would have been a huge disaster for the company. Mike, any additional thoughts on this recall delay?
The recall, yeah, absolutely. First of all, it seems clear to me that they should have out of the box had it off by default. Secondly, they should have the kind of, you should need biometrics, probably 2 biometrics, a fingerprint and a face recognition biometrics, just to interact with a set of data right off the bat. It has to be you looking at it. You can't just have it be like whoever happens to walk up to your laptop or steal your laptop or whatever is able to see literally everything you've done. They need to automate the non-capture of passwords, sensitive information, anything in your 1Password app. They need to do a much, much, much better job at security. I think it's doable, though. I think it's very doable. And by the way, it reminds me of like a long time ago, back in the 90s, it was very common that people would install a tool that would basically index every single thing on your device, everything. And you could quickly find things. There was no AI, so it was basically rote. So you basically type in 3 letters, and instantly you'd have a list of files that contain those 3 letters. And as you type more letters, it would narrow it down.
Yeah.
It gave it to you in random order and stuff like that. AI would be great at presenting and giving you the most likely thing you're looking for, that sort of thing. It would essentially be the similar to Recall, right? Taking screenshots every 3 seconds of everything you're doing seems like kind of a weird way to do it.
Yeah.
You basically just want to be able to get at everything that you've had before and have some help from AI to sort of like prioritize it. But again, I don't think this is a super unique idea. It's just a unique. I don't think it's a super unique outcome. I think it's a super unique approach to it. But I think for sure they're going to do it. They're going to release this. It's not going to be secure enough unless they change their basic approach to doing it.
Right.
But I tend to think that this is going to be kind of awesome. And by the way, nobody's talking about this, but this is life logging, right? We talked about life logging for years, and even Gordon Bell wrote about this in Computer World if you want more details on this. But Gordon Bell was a computer scientist. He was one of the pioneers. He was super into life logging, and he gave it up in 2007 when the iPhone came out because he said that we can gather way too much information now, and we don't have the AI that will enable us to use it. The very week that he died, Microsoft first announced Recall. Okay, and Recall is the ultimate life logging tool.
Yeah.
It captures everything and then enables you to get at what you want to get at instantly, right? So this is exactly the kind of tool that Gordon Bell envisioned decades ago.
Yeah.
And we finally got it, and nobody's even using the L word.
Well, so interestingly, the thing that intrigues me is how did Microsoft allow this feature to get to the point where it was in the product announcement and nobody at the company had said, well, wait a minute, this might be a security risk or this might be seen, why did it take outside people to kind of raise this curtain? Is it just that people were afraid to address it like that, or if someone did, then it was dismissed? Like it does feel like a failure of the company to recognize the good and the bad of something like this. It almost feels like, well, we've got to get these AI PCs out, and we've got to make some money on this, and so we're throwing a lot of different cool features to try to get people to buy them without realizing that, well, maybe some of these things aren't very good.
It's something that both Microsoft and Google have been doing. Microsoft, if you recall, one of its first chatbots to be controversial was called Tay.
Yeah.
It was trained on social media, and then when it started spewing the kind of garbage you find on social media, Microsoft was like, "Wow, we never thought of that." And it's like, "Well, how did you not think of that?" And then Google with Gemini and so on, they came out with something, then had to withdraw it. Then they came out with something else and had to withdraw that. And it's like the idea that these companies that are saying, "Hey, trust us, our AI is amazing." It's like, no, we can't trust you because you don't seem to have any sort of awareness about what is going to happen when people use your tool.
Yeah.
And one of Microsoft's big selling points is its security awareness, and so it's just flabbergasting that they would have shipped this without way more solid ways to why didn't they roll it out in a beta, have all the hackers and security researchers attack it, see how bulletproof it was?
Yep.
Why didn't they do any of that stuff? They seem to get drunk on the power of these tools and say, wait till we get this out there.
Yeah.
Everybody's minds are going to be blown, and they sort of become blind to actually what's going to happen and how embarrassing it's going to be for the company to have to withdraw these things.
The really cynical side of me says that this is part of a product strategy for a lot of these companies. And they could go, well, we could spend 6 months, we could spend 3 to 6 months testing this with, internal security testers and penetration testers or all that other stuff. Or we could just release it and then see what the rest of the world does. They're basically using the rest of the world as play testers. You see this in the video game space, right, Chris? Where they'll release a game and then all of the players will find it, or all the users will find it, all the bugs, and then they'll be like, oh, we'll fix it, and then it becomes you're always a beta tester as an end user these days.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I do think that it's mainly just to productize AI.
Yeah,
honestly, because think about it. AI is the new gold rush today. Everybody's grabbing their shovel and wheelbarrow and going out in the West trying to mine for gold, and eventually maybe the bubble will burst. I don't know, but I agree with you. It does just feel like that a little bit.
Yeah.
They're just trying to leverage the AI and try to make something out of it. I don't know, something to pack into their new laptops to try to sell. New products, new laptops.
Right.
And
so the next story I want to talk about is related to this, because this was a company making a decision to actually stop using something. And they never said it was bad, but there was this, a lot of story making headlines a lot this week is McDonald's has decided to end its AI drive-through test with IBM. The fast food giant will end a test run of its AI drive-through technology partnership with IBM in more than 100 restaurants. The so-called automated order taker will be shut off no later than July 26th, according to a memo sent to franchisees late last week. And this was reported by CNBC. The global partnership began in 2021. The combination of technologies from the two companies aimed to simplify and speed up operations with voice-activated ordering. Here's a quote. While there have been successes to date, we feel this is an opportunity to explore voice ordering solutions more broadly, said the franchisee memo from Mason Smoot, Senior Vice President and Chief Restaurant Officer for McDonald's. I want to be a Chief Restaurant Officer. That sounds like a fun title to have. There's been a lot of other companies that have been trying this too. I think Del Taco, Wingstop, Panera Bread. There's been a lot of stuff on social media about how bad some of the technology was. And so it was getting a black eye. I don't know if it was getting a black eye from McDonald's. We had a show here. We have a show called Demo, and we had a voice ordering company come in. And while it wasn't obvious, well, I guess it was obvious, but we never said it on the show. But so I don't want to get that company in trouble. But it was clear that they were testing with McDonald's, the way that we were ordering the food on this demo. So maybe McDonald's decided, like, okay, this thing with IBM isn't working to the way we want it to. There's a lot of other companies out there. Let's just kind of end this relationship and then explore that with everybody else. Again, I'm going to put on my cynical hat here and say I think there was a lot of results that said they needed to run this system and still use the traditional employee running the drive-through, and so from an ROI perspective, it didn't make sense.
It probably just boiled down to money.
Yeah,
they probably just ended up costing too much.
And why should we spend all this money on this and we still have to pay this worker? And especially since that minimum wage went up in California and some other places too.
Yeah, fast food. Well, the other thing too is it's like IBM is IBM. I mean, they're probably going to look at, I don't know, maybe like startups or something, or try to get a better deal.
Even in that story, they were saying that it's possible that they're working with Google on something like that. But because they've been so good at AI stuff right now.
I mean, the problem is that with any sort of AI, that you can make something 99% perfect, but that last 1% is really, really hard.
Yeah.
That's why most of the actual operational self-driving car trials that are happening in the country now, including San Francisco, with Waymo, there's a NASA-style control room of human beings monitoring everything and taking over when necessary, because you're not going to get to 100%. Now, with McDonald's, what would be an acceptable rate of perfection, or on the other side, acceptable rate of failure?
Yeah.
Less than 1%? I'd say less than 1% is pretty good.
I've got the number here, Mike. So this is a great segue. So in this story, they were saying that they were still hearing that accuracy remains in the low to mid 80% range and operating costs are high, while a wider test of the technology had not yet taken place. And this analyst said accuracy is the most important thing right now. It will have to be at least 95% accurate, and it will have to save franchisees money over having a person in the drive-thru. And the way it is designed now, it does neither. So it was, 95 seems to be the point where I think people would accept it.
But that's not going to solve their problem, because their problem is TikTok. The problem is people are with their phones taking video of these ridiculous orders, and if they get it, let's say they get to 99%, 1% of McDonald's orders is thousands of orders a day,
right?
That are really horrible. And some percentage of those are going to be filmed and put on TikTok, and it looks like an absolute disaster, even if they hit like super high numbers. And so the problem is, part of the problem is the novelty. Part of the problem, but I really think one of the reasons it's expensive is that they're working with IBM. I'm sure that there are scrappier startups that would be able to offer this at a much lower rate. But if they're committed to it, what they would do is they would have human operators monitoring it. If there's a problem, stepping in and taking over, and so and then using that information to fix the system and working with it and take a long-term view, which I'm sure behind the scenes they may be doing.
Yeah.
But you can't just say, well, let's try this new technology. Well, it didn't work, so never mind, and just back off. They gotta stick to it. They gotta work on training it, and they have to have human operators who are ready to step in and deal with the like ridiculous hallucinations and errors.
Right, Mike. When was the last time you were in the States here? How long ago has it been?
It's been about, I think, 2 months.
Oh, okay. So,
yeah.
You know who has the best drive-through experience, in my opinion?
No.
Chick-fil-A. Have you been to a Chick-fil-A drive-through recently?
I've never been to a Chick-fil-A drive-through.
Okay, so what they have is they do the thing with the 2 lanes, but what they're now doing is that you're not giving your order generally to a machine or a speaker. They have employees outside. Basically, you wait in line, and they've got a little tablet, and and so you're doing a human order with a person, and then they get you through a lot quicker. That's
absolutely the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Because a big problem with fast food drive-through is the speaker system.
Right.
And people's accents. And sometimes somebody in the passenger seat is yelling across the driver's seat
exactly.
like through a window, and they're like, what? And then so having that first interface, person to person, where you can really hear each other clearly is a great idea.
And again, maybe Chick-fil-A is a little bit of a different restaurant chain than McDonald's is, but the experience of going through that is a lot easier and quicker usually than it is for any time my kids go to McDonald's.
If I was running Chick-fil-A or any of these other companies, the thing that I would do is I would have a nice microphone on that tablet, and I would let AI take a stab at the order.
Right.
And the human would be like, yep, that's right. Boom. That would cut down time without having to like actually select everything. Let AI take a stab at it, correct it if it's wrong, and then move on. I think that's the stage where we should be at with that sort of application of the AI.
Right. All right. I want to move on to another topic. It was a couple of bad weeks for Adobe. I don't know if you saw some of these stories, but first off, the U.S. government is suing Adobe for allegedly hiding expensive fees and making it difficult to cancel a subscription. In a complaint filed last week, the Department of Justice claims that Adobe has harmed consumers by enrolling them in its default most lucrative subscription plan without clearly disclosing important plan terms. The lawsuit alleges Adobe hides the terms of its annual paid monthly plan in the fine print and behind optional text boxes and hyperlinks. In doing so, the company fails to properly disclose the early termination fee incurred upon cancellation that can amount to hundreds of dollars, according to the complaint. So the DOJ is basically now going after Adobe for its, was it Creative Cloud, I think, subscription? Yep. And this comes on the heels of the other issue that Adobe was facing a couple of weeks ago, where it was changing the terms of service for its customers, and some people figured out, or they assumed that this meant that every project that you were doing would be allowed by Adobe to train its AI on, and that got everybody up in arms.
I just think it's a bad idea, like to use your customers' content as a way to train an AI model.
Yeah.
And then not be direct with them. Like that's just low. Like, come on.
This was another example of kind of a company walking back its proposal or its ideas based on backlash and feedback. I guess the best positive you could think of this is that people are actually going to start reading terms and conditions a lot more than they used to. So, Mike, what are you?
I think you're
probably not.
I think you're overly optimistic. I don't think anybody's ever going to read any terms of service ever.
If they can make it one page, sure. But if it's the typical 100 pages,
What if it was completely honest terms and conditions for a company and be like, yeah, basically we're going to take your data and we're going to do whatever we want. Right. You can't do anything because you love this thing so much.
and we have the right to change our mind about any of this stuff, and we probably will.
Yeah,
it's so it's kind of good that they're going after Adobe. I mean, the what they're talking about is dark patterns, where you have you design an interface or you make decisions about the user experience in a way that benefits the company. It's an absolute pandemic out there among Silicon Valley companies, from social media companies to others. The dark patterns problem is major. The difference with Adobe is Adobe's pretty expensive, and so it's really, I think it's really much more consequential in dollars and cents terms for Adobe than it is, like, say, for Facebook or something like that.
Right.
But I think that the in terms of using AI for training, I think this problem has already been solved. I mean, they just need to apply the existing solution, which is this: whenever you download an app, or whenever you have a problem, or something happens on your phone or your laptop, it's very common for software to say, hey, do you mind sharing this with the company? And you could say yes or no.
Yeah.
I think it should be just like that. It's like, hey, you're a creative person. Would you like to help us train AI? Yes or no? And just have it be opt-in. It's not as much data as just taking it without asking.
Right.
But it's a heck of a lot more sustainable and engenders a lot more goodwill among your best customers if you're asking permission.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would agree to it.
Well, it's that old excuse of asking permission or asking forgiveness, and most of the times people just do things and then they ask for forgiveness rather than just trying to get a no up front. The thing with the dark patterns, this was something that I think the DOJ went after Amazon for as well.
Yep.
In the difficulty of
we talked about that before, how hard it is to cancel from.
And they do seem to be making headway with a lot of the streaming services. It is easier to cancel a streaming service than it used to be. And so again, another example of, so I haven't experienced that myself. I'm fine with the amount of money that I pay for the Adobe Creative Cloud. I feel like I get value out of that. But yeah, this could be a warning shot for other companies that might be trying these dark patterns, right?
Dark patterns.
Yeah. So does that go away, or do they just try to get trickier? I mean, yeah. It's like that old sales. They just
do the minimum.
It's like that old sales tactic when you say no and they just keep pestering you. You're like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure you want to quit? Are you sure? Are you sure? All right, fill out 17 forms and then we'll let you quit.
Yeah.
So, all right. And then finally, I want just a work culture type thing, but it's also got a technology angle. According to a report from Bloomberg, based on disclosures filed with the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, Wells Fargo fired more than a dozen employees after an investigation revealed that they were using devices or apps to simulate productivity on their computers. What's not known is how over a dozen staffers had jobs where their productivity could be measured by mouse movements, but apparently they were using these things called mouse jigglers. It's software you put on your computer. It basically mimics a mouse movement. And so if you've also got software that's monitoring whether you are actually using a mouse and tracking productivity that way, apparently they were using these and probably on a beach or watching TV or doing something while they were working at home. But this basically, this was the warning shot from the employer side of things. It's like, well, yeah, we're going to be watching you, and maybe you shouldn't have these mouse jigglers. The whole thing seemed goofy to me because if you're expending that much effort to download a program and then operate it like you were like, just do your work. Or maybe they just I don't know. It just seems like the extreme part of this whole work at home thing.
I think they need to think more outside the box here.
So who do you mean by they? The employees or the employers?
The employees here. So, maybe instead of using a software, get yourself a cat. Train them every once in a while to just play with the mouse. Maybe we put a little, mouse costume on your mouse, and, every once in a while, just train them to, swat at the mouse, and there you go.
They also step on the keyboard, which helps.
Yes, there you go.
The whole thing is dumb on both sides. I mean, if your definition of productivity is that the mouse is in motion,
yeah,
I don't know what kind of work that is, or what it's just a ridiculous metric, and you can't. The days when you can tell if somebody is working are over. If somebody's using a computer, right, you might be like hovering over them and watching them, and they might be playing online poker. They might be shopping on Amazon. It looks like they're working. You can't. You have to. Companies have to figure out how to pay their employees to achieve results.
Right.
And if the results they achieve are acceptable, then they've done their job. You can't say, well, just keep that mouse moving and you're going to remain employed. It's ridiculous. There's also a device that people used to use a lot called a boss key. You know what a boss key is?
Yep.
This is like, some people actually had like foot pedals. So it's like a button that would go on the floor and you're playing a video game, and the second you step on it, a spreadsheet comes up over the video game because the boss just came around the corner and is going to ask you about your TPS reports. So it's like, there will always be an arms race between bad productivity enforcement and bad productivity employees. And, this is just one of the latest trends.
Right. And again, if you're an employee,
home isn't the problem.
Yeah, I think during some of the Zoom call eras, during the early parts of the pandemic, where everybody was having so many Zoom calls, people started putting in frozen images, or they put a photo of themselves, or they did it's almost like that episode, or it was in the movie Speed, where they did the loop to make it look like they were still driving the bus when they weren't. And then that was mocked on The Simpsons, where they were doing that to try to get out of work. Again, It was that whole idea of like, well, we'll just fool that camera that's watching us.
There was a hilarious video that circulated, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, maybe, where, no, less than that, two years ago, where this guy had taken a picture, and it was tongue in cheek, of course, but he'd taken a picture of his home office background, and he had it printed on this like fiberboard and had it behind him, and he was taking meetings on Zoom, but he was actually on a snowmobile, and trying to pull off, so it's just ridiculous. You got to have different metrics, and it's again, working from home is not the problem. People goof off in the office. They might even goof off more, because I think people who work remotely are more likely to be paranoid.
Yeah.
About and insecure about their jobs than people who work in the office. If you can sort of touchy-feely gauge whether your boss thinks you're doing a good job while you're playing online poker or not, if they're in person. But if you're doing that at home, you're like, maybe my job is at risk here. I can't really tell. And so I don't know. I think working remotely is not the problem, and mouse monitoring is not the solution.
Right. So, all right, that's all the stories I got this week. We didn't even mention this because we've talked about this for so many times, that NVIDIA is now the most valuable company in terms of valuation. Yes. But we talked about that when they passed Apple, and so last week again they've now passed Microsoft, and so. Good on NVIDIA. That's if you want to hear more of our analysis, go back a few weeks for some of these other episodes that we did. All right, Mike. I think we're not going to be talking to you next week, but then there's the 4th of July, so we will see you again in mid-July. So enjoy France. Do you think you're going to be in another country on the 11th, or are you in here for a while?
I think I may be in California. I may be in California.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back to the States then. At that point, and we'll talk to you then.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Keith.
Yep. That's all the time we have for today's episode. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any comments you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.